My name is Randy Haragan with Haragan Properties, and we work with churches that are looking for an opportunity to capture some extra resources for their ministry. In the one particular case here, we have partnered with a church that had some land that they've owned for decades and decades, and just realized they weren't going to use the land, and realized they could use the resources to help the ministry. So they got in touch with me. We began to explore different possibilities, what could be done possibly. And eventually we came into an agreement. We were able to purchase some unused land, and we're building 11 townhomes right here in southeast San Diego area, Paradise Hills. At first you do just a lot of study. You begin by just evaluating the resource itself. If it's just raw land, we have to determine what is that land zoned to be used for, what could be done with it. My focus, what I'm most adept at doing, is providing housing for people. And what I mean by that is I really believe that we need houses that people can buy. So a piece of land could be turned into an apartment complex. That might be a good idea. But it seems like that's something that so many people are doing now. It's leaving a big void for people that are trying to buy a house. So that's really my hope, is that we can do that. We can find a piece of land, find out what could be done, what steps need to be done through the city, the county, the state, in order to allow that land to be able to be partitioned off if it's not already. And then there's a lot of working together with the church. Okay, what does the church sense would be the best use of that land, as far as we're creating a long-term neighbor for the church. So it's important that the church have a say in it. And I really respect that. I want to do everything I can do to help local community churches, because I just think that churches that are located in neighborhoods, that's the hope for any community. So I really, that to me is very important. A lot of work goes into it, but it's a lot of work that we take care of. And what I mean by that is the church is just kept in the loop through periodic reports on, okay, here's what we've discovered so far. We found that this is a possibility, or we found there's a fatal flaw because of this particular zoning thing. And we'll just sort of share our findings with you, and we'll go through it. As long as we keep getting green lights, then we continue to move forward. And at some point, we get to the place where we're able to say, okay, we need to come to an agreement on what the value of this is. All of this investigation and all of the work with the city and through different professional organizations like surveyors and civil engineers, attorneys, etc., those are cash outlays that we make. It's not on the church. Now, we're careful that we don't spend a lot of money before we feel like this is a viable option. So we're careful. We're not just throwing money. But we know that at the end of the day, it might not work, and that ought to be my responsibility to do that, to pay for that kind of an investigation. Then when we get the results, then we can sit down and say, okay, here's what we found, and here's what we think the value of whatever we're going to do could turn into and be for the church. So once we get to a point where we feel relatively certain that there is an opportunity to move forward, and that opportunity could be a couple of different things. It could be the property already is a separate piece of recognized APN, assessor's parcel number has already been applied. That land is already there, and it could just be purchased. That might be a 1-week research effort requiring very little money, and at that point, we could place a value on it by doing a market analysis. And we would present that to the leadership of the church and say, we think this is a fair offer. We'd like to offer to buy this land. That would be the cleanest and simplest situation. Let's say another situation like the one we're involved in right now. Once we determined that we thought the zoning was going to be favorable to building houses, we realized there's 2 lots here, and the 2 lots don't quite divide the way that the church envisions that they'd like it to divide. So that required us to do, before we could buy anything, we had to create the piece of land that could be purchased. Now that became a very expensive process and quite lengthy and involved. So we made a commitment to one another, to the church, what we would pay if this all works out. And we paid to get it into the place where it was actually a buyable piece of land that could be then developed. That's a little longer process, a little more money up front. But once we got to that point, I believe in this case we put down earnest money, and we couldn't buy it because the lot had not been yet created. But upon the completion of the lot and the formalization of that lot, then we were able to pay the balance and pay the balance to the church. Once we buy the property, then we began the formal process of preparing the land for the build. Again, each one of these steps will probably take longer than you might expect it to take, because we're working through the city governments, county governments, and there's lots of bureaucracy and lots of things that take a lot of patience. It will keep you involved every step of the way, but it begins with a lot of studies, topological studies, geographic studies, historical studies, a lot of studies. And then after that, then there begins to be, on several different fronts, processes in place, like we began to develop a site map. The site map is kind of an overall picture of what this is going to be. And you get a rough idea of what we're going to build. And again, all of this information we're meeting as regularly as you like, so that you can see and feel good about what's going to be built as your longtime next door neighbor. It takes longer than you would guess, longer than I would hope, before you can actually begin doing real work. Most of the work is on paper, drafting, submitting, correcting, trying again, and eventually we get plans that are set and approved, and we begin the dirt work. The bulldozers show up, and lots of digging, and lots of turning over of dirt, lots of preparation for putting in the pipes in the ground and getting things ready to go out into the street and connect. So there begins to be a lot of that kind of work, and then that goes on again longer than you might think, and they dig holes a lot deeper than you would have expected. And eventually there comes a point when they say, okay, now you can start building something. And that's kind of neat, because then, you start framing up the foundations, you pour the concrete, and it actually finally starts looking like, oh, there's actually going to be something there. It's kind of neat. And then as you go along, you just continue to, there's inspectors, there's things that somebody missed, there's things that, there's a delay here, there's this, that, and the other. But basically, once that begins, once you break ground and pour the concrete, you, in all likelihood, are going to have a house or a couple of houses or a few houses next door within a year or so. So in a nutshell, as we work with churches, we evaluate, is there a resource that can be purchased and developed into housing? The church is really the silent partner in this whole thing. There's not anything that we're really asking of the church to do. We do all of the due diligence. We pay for the due diligence to find out if there is something that can be done. If so, then we analyze the market, put a value on that particular resource, and then we present it to the church. This little piece of your land for this much money, and here's what we're going to build. If all of that makes sense and you think that works, then we have a formal agreement, we go into escrow, we pay for the land, and we begin our work. We continue to keep you involved, seek your opinion on things, but at that point, we are now fully invested. The church has received payment, and we're moving ahead. One of the reasons that I really feel drawn to this work with churches is my background. I grew up in the church. I've served in full-time ministry. I have a Master's of Divinity degree that I went to school at Pepperdine and got. I am still actively involved in ministry. I primarily focus working through home fellowships. My kids have been homeschooled at the Heritage Christian Schools, and so we're involved in that sort of a world. And I just have a deep love, particularly for neighborhood churches. They've changed my life as a young kid growing up, and I see the good they do. And I want to try and find ways that works to give them the resources they need to keep going and keep being salt and light in these communities.